Thank you very much, Allison. That's fascinating and a wonderful way to begin this webinar. Our second speaker, we're going to move right along, is Dr. Alexandra Charette. And Alexandra is going to talk about civic engagement as a response to economic exclusion among immigrant women in Montreal. Alexandra?
Can you see my screen? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So this project examines the links between civic engagement and the citizenship of immigrants, and especially immigrant women. It explores the political meaning of immigrant women's civic engagement, and then explores how their civic engagement practices relate to their sense of citizenship and how they experience and understand their own citizenship. In this presentation, I am particularly interested in the links between civic engagement of immigrant women in Montreal and their economic citizenship. I look at how the two forms of participation in society are interrelated and interact with each other. I will begin with a brief review of the literature on civic engagement, which I place for this research in the context of citizenship and immigration studies. Next, I will present the data collection methods, and finally some research results. The study of citizenship, understood in its formal or procedural sense, generally takes a top-down perspective. It looks at the institutional and legal systems that govern the relationship between citizens and states. They analyze the laws, rights, and responsibilities linked to citizenship and the forms of protection granted to people who are or are not citizens of the place where they live, as well as their ability to practice political citizenship and how different groups practice it. On the other hand, the study of citizenship as a positioning towards a political entity generally adopts a bottom-up perspective and is interested in the substantive aspects of citizenship: belonging, membership, dynamics of inclusion, exclusion, forms of participation, like economic participation. However, the substantive aspects of citizenship, which refers to the capacity of individuals and social groups to be recognized socially as full citizens and members of society, to act and to be perceived as such, are influenced by several factors that are external to the state and by all the conditions and legal characteristics that define citizenship in different states. So in her book, Genealogies of Citizenship, I like this quote from Margaret Summers. She focuses on the interactions between the state, civil society, and the market. So she focuses on the dynamics of inclusion, exclusion of citizens that result from these dynamics. And she highlights the importance of paying attention to the dynamics that influence individual and more specifically immigrants' substantive citizenship. So substantive citizenship, individuals' ability to act upon the rights and status that are granted to them remain in a certain way independent from their legal status. So immigrants, for example, are granted civil, political, and social citizenship rights relatively and comparatively easily in Canada. However, despite their formal citizenship, equal access to substantive citizenship often requires constant efforts, particularly in the professional and economic areas. As such, authors like Vicky Schultz or Judith Clark and many others discuss the links between economic participation and citizenship, particularly for women. For example, for Judith Clark, paid work is a source of respect and public recognition that must be considered as an essential and fundamental component of substantive citizenship. But as it is very well documented in the literature, universal access to paid employment must be understood in the light of the dynamics of the market in the broad sense, which favors educated and native men over all others, and particularly immigrants and immigrant women. Immigrants, and most importantly, immigrant women, face various obstacles to economic integration. They're more often responsible for managing with family and household matters, finding a school or daycare for the kids, health appointments, paperwork, etc., which delays much of their integration, including language learning and academic credentials and many other things. So as a response to these obstacles, many immigrant women who in Quebec, as well as in the rest of Canada, often have fairly high levels of education, tend to get involved in their communities and in civil society organization as a springboard to paid employment for different reasons, because it helps them improve their language skills, increase their social capital. It helps them familiarize with cultural codes, and it sometimes is recognized as that famous Canadian experience. So in this study, I am interested in the links between civic engagement activities of immigrant women, understood as their involvement in community through civil society organizations, whose objective goes beyond individual and family benefits, and which is to identify and to address issues and problems of social or political nature and their economic integration. My research question broadly is how immigrant women's civic engagement related to their sense of citizenship, and more specifically to their economic citizenship. I conducted semi-structured interviews with immigrant women, 28 of them, from 15 different countries, living in Canada for 3 to 10 years, involved or who were involved in organizations for at least 2 years. So some of them spoke retrospectively about their experience. 15 citizens, 13 permanent residents who accumulated 81 activities in 50 organizations. In the interviews, I was interested in their path. So many of them, as you can see, were involved in many different organizations, or accumulated different activities at the same time, or one after the other. I also was interested in the main reasons for getting involved and the interactions with other activities and other forms of participation, such as economic integration, economic participation, but also academic or things with the kids, or things that prevented them to continue their involvement. So for most participants, civic engagement practiced when they arrived in Canada can be a preparatory activity for entering the labor market. If engagement is in one organization rather than another, does not seem to be linked to the activities that are offered or that they can practice as such. It seems rather to be related to a desire to take an active part in the new society or the new community, with the aim of entering the labor market later. So data show that several participants would have preferred, under conditions permitting, to have a paid job than to become involved in civil society organization. But this decision to get involved is more of a complex thinking than the simple financial benefit of paid employment compared to civic engagement. For most of the women I met, the choice of civic engagement is circumstantial. That is, it is linked to the context of their life at the time they were engaged in the organization. For some, civic engagement allowed them to for greater flexibility in schedule, allow them to be closer to their children during the early years of immigration. For others, engagement activities allowed them to both experience a workplace-like environment and to bring their kids with them. In general, the participants made comments that relate to their engagement practices at the start of their Canadian experience, their early immigration days, and their subsequent economic integration. And this shows a conflict between the two social worlds that are paid employment and civic engagement. The conflict between those two social worlds seems to be moral in nature for some participants and material in nature for others, but for most of them, it is a double bind. In its moral component, the situation can be understood as a conflict which takes place between two different but non-equivalent forms of participation in the whole society, which have different values. The participant seems to place a greater value on a job, particularly considering their own integration. But the moral conflict is often associated with a material conflict, which is embodied in the concrete impossibility to carry out both civic engagement and to assume the responsibilities of paid employment, which is often because of a lack of resources, mental load, time. The analysis also showed that the participation of immigrants in community organizations is a defense strategy to face economic integration obstacles. But civic engagement also questions the type of path it represents towards economic integration. Because the activities that the respondents have chosen to practice may not lead to a job which corresponds to their level of qualifications or which is stable. As many authors showed before, civic engagements offers relatively limited perspective, particularly with regard to the integration of a stable or qualified job, when we know that most immigrant women come to Canada with a fairly high level of education. The analysis also showed that civic engagement is used as a long-term strategy of belonging, which says a lot about the role of economic integration in developing a sense of citizenship. Recognition by co-citizens or co-residents as the full citizen does seem to come from taking up paid employment, which is a better recognized form of productive activity. So civic engagement represents, for several women, a response to exclusion from economic citizenship, but also a response to exclusion from social inclusion. It is used to enable them to overcome obstacles to economic integration, but also to foster social integration, which was very important in the data I collected. So this analysis shows in the end that full citizenship and democracy demand that everyone have the same capacity for engaging in decision processes that affect their own life, and that everyone is included in the sense that they can be in contact with a recognized form of economic activity, but that capacity is undermined by the loss of dignity and sense of exclusion from citizenry, which becomes which economic exclusion may foster. And civic engagement may be a way forward, but it also comes with its own challenges.
Alexandra, can you finish?
I'm done.
Oh, parfait. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for speaking in English.